In this video, I'm going to attempt to show how to replace a windshield on a 1963 Chevy C10 with the stainless steel trim around the windshield. Not all of the trucks came with stainless steel trim. It makes it a little more difficult to my understanding. Brothers is a vendor that has a nice video of a guy replacing a wraparound windshield like this, and I'm going to follow those instructions, but the stainless steel trim is not described. As you can see, my windshield has a lot of delamination, and over on this side it has these rainbow stripes from the windshield wiper blades being damaged. On the back of the glass I have some cracks. It's the big back glass. This has a bead that inserts, so we're going to replace that too. And I'm just fortunate enough over here to have salvaged 1961 glass, including big bag glass. That's just extra stuff I saved. And the reason the glass is coming out is I need some repair here up on the A-pillar. I have a big hole right here, and this piece is pretty rotten all the way down. And thankfully I have a good piece from a 1961 truck that I salvaged, so that will be used for the repair patch. I intend to use a knife to cut through the old cracked rubber, and then we'll figure out how the trim comes out. I'm under the impression that trying to pull the trim out before removing and cutting the rubber would be a mistake. I would probably damage it. I think you can see up here at the top part where I can peel some of this down. I found some cracked areas, so I'm peeling out the area that would be, I guess, to the inside of the trim, and that seems to be working very nicely. I think it's cracked and damaged enough that I'm pulling that out, and then we'll get a look at the trim and see how it's inserted. Well, the serrated knife didn't really do too much, so I'm going to try this pick to grab a hold of some of that rubber pieces and see if I can't pull it out. I was able to get this piece out, and it has an interesting lip, which I will show later. But it's an interesting configuration. So what seems to work best is to run a knife along the windshield and the rubber and cut down through that outer layer to the level where it meets the edge of the windshield, at which point you will see that it's contacting, your knife blade will contact the horizontal edge of the steel trim. So that's your stopping point. I've removed the rubber here, and I'm trying to remove it here. And it's a struggle because it's old and hard, and a serrated knife that's very sharp will help. It's a struggle. I'm having some success removing it from the inside of the windshield as well, which anything that you can get is going to be helpful. So I was able to lift the glass up and out of the truck without removing all of that lower edge, and I was able to accomplish that by removing down to basically the bottom of the A-pillar on both sides, all of the rubber both inside and most of the outside, and then I tipped it forward, and the windshield came out. The top edge was able to clear this lip satisfactorily, so that's out. So now I will peel the rubber and separate the stainless trim, and I'll be able to give you a cross section to see how it's actually assembled. So the stainless trim has these little connection pieces that basically are little sleeves There's one at the center on the bottom. There's one at the center on the top. And then there's one about halfway up the A-pillar on each side. You'll notice that the trim has a horizontal flange. It's at a right angle to the face of the trim. And then that trim flange has a lip that goes at a right angle up. And that's, I guess, to keep it from pulling out, because that little lip here would catch and hook and not allow the trim to be pulled out by the fingers. So that's an important feature. So I'm now going to cut through here so we can get a end view look of what the rubber is made like. So here you're looking at the windshield gasket. The outside is where my fingertip is tapping, where the trim lives. And you can see how the trim goes into the rubber rubber piece at a right angle, and then it has a right angle there that kind of holds it in place and keeps it from being pulled out as long as the glass is in place. So I think what happens during assembly is you put the rubber gasket on the windshield, tape it in place so it's exactly where you want it. Then you put the trim in by peeling down this edge here, slide the trim in, fold that back up. Now you have all the trim in the gasket. Now you put the gasket on the truck. This lower bottom groove is where the metal flange of the windshield frame goes. Where my thumb is now is going to be outside the cab, and this is going to be inside the cab against the dash. So that's how it sits. Well, the windshield is out. Now it's time to do a good assessment of these rotted areas. Looks like I have some rot right here too on the passenger side, so that's not surprising. We'll get all that rebuilt and cleaned up, and we'll put a new windshield in it. Stay tuned. Okay, we're out in the shop with a wraparound style windshield. We're going to put the gasket on it. Now, this may apply to other vehicles with wraparound windshields, so I'm just going to show you what I'm doing with a 1963 Chevrolet C10 truck windshield. So there's the brand new windshield. What I did is I stretched the gasket out in the sun for a few days, let it warm up. Then I took some tape and I marked or pasted it down on the inside of the windshield approximately to cover the middle of the windshield. I don't know where the middle is, somewhere in there. And I did the same at the top of the windshield. Now what I'm going to do is find the middle of the windshield so that I know where to put my gasket seam and the middle of the gasket at the top and bottom. So I, just for the sake of I only have one hand to work with while I'm videoing, I used electrical wire because it's not going to stretch and change length, and I put it at the top of the curve or the peak in the corner here. And I stretched it out, and I used a piece of tape and I marked it right there. And I mark the tape so that it doesn't move, and I mark where the tape lands on the piece of tape that's stuck to the windshield. Now that's an arbitrary mark. We don't know the distance, we don't know how many centimeters or inches it is, but it really doesn't matter. Now I'm going to take this wire and I'm going to move it over to the other side and do the exact same thing. I'm going to stretch it out and mark, and there I have two marks. Now it looks like my marks are just a little bit past center because they cross over each other, so I know the center of the windshield at the bottom is halfway between these two marks. Simple, easy, no measuring, no calculations, no math. I'm going to do the same for the top of the windshield. Why do it top and bottom? Well, the gasket on this windshield has a seam, and the seam goes at the bottom. So I want to put the seam at the center of the windshield, but I also marked the center of the windshield gasket for the top with a piece of tape. Now I know to put that at the top of the windshield and kind of center it up. That way I have an equal amount of gasket on both halves of the windshield. So I have the windshield now marked. The center of the bottom is between these two marks. The center of the top is right here. Now I'm going to center my gasket on the windshield, and I'm going to start putting the windshield gasket on at the corners. I'll explain. So now I've done a couple of things. I took the tape and I moved it away from the edge of the windshield, but I kept my center mark. And I positioned my seam on the bottom of the windshield gasket to the bottom of that line. And I did the same with the top tape and the center of my gasket there. So now I'm going to start in the corners, and the reason I start in the corners is basically if I start in the center and go around, I found that by the time you get to the corner, the center has fallen off and you just are constantly struggling. Each time I put some gasket on, I'm going to hold it with some tape. I'm going to start on the ends of the windshield and work my way to the center. So I have the gasket on. It took me about 15 minutes. To be honest, I started by taping the center in place, both top and bottom. Then I went to the corners, started working the corners on, went back to the other corner, adjusted the slack on the top and bottom of the windshield so it looked right, and kept working around the windshield, kind of meeting. And the last section I did was the very top corner of the windshield, up in that area. But it's on. Now the gasket, just to make sure you have yours on right, the bottom side will have these ridges and a very deep groove for the gasket, for the windshield flange. That flange goes inside, so the grooves that you can see here go to the outside of the flange. That windshield flange is that metal ridge that sits inside this groove here. So these ridges here go to the outside of the flange. This is a fairly thin rubber piece. I'll call it a rubber flange to the outside and a much thicker piece to the inside, but that's the way it's designed. Now it's time to flip this windshield over and put on the stainless trim. One thing you'll notice is I'm using a pipe rack, kind of like they use in the auto body shops. You notice how I have it narrow, and that's so that the edges of the windshield are not bumping into the stand that I'm using. I have some pipe insulation on the stand so I don't scratch my windshield while I'm moving it around. The other thing is, when you're putting the flange on, slide your hip up against this side of the windshield and work on the opposite side. It gives you a little bit of way to push on the rubber onto the glass without the windshield sort of sliding away from you. Those are the tips I can give you. So I have the passenger side bottom piece of trim that goes partway up the A-pillar, and I want you to see how this is designed. The piece that is horizontal goes in, and then it has a little hook on it that tilts up, and the gasket has the same shape. So when this is inside the gasket and there's pressure from the windshield being in place, this hook catches on the rubber and prevents it from being pulled out by somebody pulling on the edges here and pulling it out. So it actually locks it into place. But I'm going to use the put on this piece first because it's got the most severe curves in it, and let's do that first. So I've got the first piece of trim on, and it can be a struggle sometimes. And the center section lines up here in the middle, so that's good. There's going to be a little sleeve connecting the two pieces. Now I'm going to put a piece of tape on the trim and tape it to the windshield in a horizontal fashion. This will help because the tape sticks really good to the metal, and the metal and the tape on the glass will just keep that pulled up against there. And here you can see what I did. Put those horizontal pieces of tape on, taping the trim to the glass. It sticks pretty good. It doesn't stick so good to the rubber. All right, on with the next few pieces. So this lower driver's side is halfway on, and I'll show you the technique. What you're going to do is you work from the corner up. You undo a piece of tape and slip it underneath the trim. I'm doing it one-handed here. And you're going to roll the rubber down, and it's going to want to really tend to come off the windshield, so you got to be really careful. You're going to roll the rubber down and away from the bottom edge of the windshield and press the trim in and work your way around, pressing the trim in. Don't let the windshield gasket come off. Work your way around to the center. Well, there it is. It took me a little bit, but I did it by myself. Yeah, the gasket came off a few times and I had to put it back on. But the trim is all on. I'm pretty happy with the end results, which is what I wanted. My seam is in the center at the bottom. There's my mark. My center mark for the top of the gasket is also, you know, half a centimeter off of midline, and I can adjust that probably when we install. The trim is on. Use plenty of tape. These two little plastic, I'll call them, they look like the claw of a hammer, but those are helpful when trying to work a gasket around the edge of the windshield. And I used some of this clean release tape that you use for painter's tape, because it doesn't leave a lot of adhesive on the glass to clean off later or on the stainless. But there it is. That's the most advice I can give. The rest of it you can find on the internet, but I haven't found any specific YouTube videos or posts that show how to put the trim on, how to put the gasket on, how to find the center of the windshield, all sort of in one. So I hope this was helpful to you. Well, today we're going to attempt to put this curved windshield in my 1963 C10. This has been to the body shop and all the repairs have been made. Brothers is a vendor out in California who has a really nice video on how to put a curved windshield in, but it does not include the stainless steel trim, and this windshield has the stainless trim, so this may be helpful to you if you're using a windshield with the gasket and the stainless steel trim. One of the tips they made is make sure all of these edges are free of burrs. If you find burrs, get rid of them. Make it as smooth and burr-free as possible. I have the seat out of the truck so I can crawl around on my hands and knees a little easier, working inside the cab. So just like it says in the Brothers video, I used some dish soap and a spray bottle. Got some soapy water there. I've got 20 feet of rope. They say 1/4 inch, that's 3/8. So it's a little thicker. I'm gonna try the 3/8 rope because it's what I have. If it's too thick, I'll let you know. I have my selection of tools recommended. These are plastic, this is metal. It's got a little sharper tip on it than what I would maybe like. I might grind it down, a couple other pieces. This should be useful. Let's get started. I forgot to mention, I purchased these suction glass holding devices from Harbor Freight. I do not intend to pick up and lift the windshield with them. Once the windshield is set in the opening of the truck, then I will attach them on the inside of the windshield so that I can lift and push and pull, but I don't want to risk these things failing and then the thing falling on the ground because I'm using it to lift them. So you'll see how I use them. This hook-shaped pick is ideal because it's got an elbow on it that is ideal for pushing the rope inside the seal. It really works nice. Again, I'm using this hook, the elbow of it, to push the rope into the wedge or the groove where the windshield flange goes. So it works really nice if you use this type shaped hook. So we got the lower flange in, and this corner's trying to seat, and then we're up here at this corner, and I'm pulling the string as my wife so nicely pounds away, and you'll notice the flange will flip from the outside, the rubber will flip from the outside of the flange to the inside. Go ahead, Ruth. Keep moving, and I'm pulling down with the rope. What's important is you don't go too fast. So these suction cup glass holding devices were on the inside of the windshield, and I could pull on the windshield while someone else slapped their open palm on the outside of the windshield, and thus it effectively created a little more force to each slap. And I could see that upper flange pull in. It just seemed more effective. Pretty cheap way to increase your effectiveness. One small tip, I don't know that it made a difference, but I think maybe it did, was I used some silicone lubricant grease. I put it on the flange, the windshield metal flange, and I also lubricated inside the groove where the flange sits, and all on the edges. It's not going to hurt my patina paint job, and if you're careful, you probably could use this on a painted truck, putting in the glass. It just helps everything slide. Rubber sliding on dry metal doesn't slide too good, but if it's lubricated with this or soapy water, it'll slide. This stuff here got all over my fingers, but it worked. So the guy on the Brothers video wisely recommends 1/4 inch rope. I tried the 3/8 inch rope and it was too thick, so I had to take that out and use this 1/4 inch. Now I used the nylon, I don't know, it's twisted twine. It's nylon, it's not cotton. I didn't really see much point in soaking it with soapy water because it doesn't absorb water. The other tip is get a mover's blanket or some other blanket. Take the seat out of your truck, and the mover's blanket or whatever you lay on the floor can help reduce painful knees as you climb around on the inside of your truck, moving from side to side. Well, the glass is in, and I say that I'm pretty happy. The installation was tough. We tried yesterday and just gave up because it wasn't moving, it wasn't sliding into place, and so it finally gave up, pulled it off, and then surely the gasket fell off again and I had to start all over. But the only tip I can say is when you lay the glass down, keep the top edge tilted forward a good bit, maybe to a vertical position over top of this lower flange, and get that gasket sitting on the flange and start that way, and then gradually lean it forward or lean it back against the cab. You will find that as it seats on this lower flange, that this top rubber will be passing over this edge here, and gradually you'll be able to slide it past. But it's a really close fit. It's very, very important that your corners on both sides have equal amount of distance from the A-pillar, otherwise you're going to be off center. Here's my center mark, and it really did line up really nice here and up there. You can see a little bit of a black mark on the windshield right above my fingertip, and that lined up nicely as well. So measuring at the beginning was important to get everything lined up. Pretty happy. Final installation. Once we had everything moving along nicely, this last installation probably took close to 2 hours. Yesterday we spent at least 3 hours trying to get it in, and we never did. Anyway, these tips hopefully will help you. It is something that you can do even though you have no experience, as long as you follow the brothers video. And the tips I add really only have to do with the stainless installation on the prior section of the video.